Let's go ahead and get started. Hi, I'm Ben Benson, President of the Temple Beth-El Board of Directors. On behalf of the board, clergy, and staff at Temple Beth-El, welcome to the annual meeting for our congregation. We appreciate your time this evening and have lots of information to share with you. Before we review tonight's agenda, our Vice President for Administration, Ken Katz, will officially call the meeting to order. Ken?
Thanks, Ben, and hello, everyone. There are a number of requirements from the Temple bylaws for the annual meeting that I want to acknowledge and provide comments. First, within 2 months before the start of each fiscal year, an annual meeting must be held. We are doing that now. Done. Second, notice of the meeting shall be delivered at least 10 days before the annual meeting. That has also been completed. We must have a quorum of at least 50 members in good standing and entitled to vote. I can confirm that we have a quorum this evening. And finally, the election of officers and board members is to be conducted at the annual meeting. This is scheduled and is shown in the agenda. We can officially proceed with the meeting in accordance with the Temple bylaws. The agenda for tonight: the Devar Torah will be completed by Rabbi Beth Nichols, remarks from the board president by Ben Benson, remarks from our senior rabbi, Rabbi Asher Knight, financial review and presentation of the proposed 2021-2022 budget by Liam, membership and development update by Rachel and Eden, board of director nominations by Ben, questions and answers. And let me take a little sidebar here. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box under Ask Me Your Question at any time during the presentation. We will then have a vote on the proposed board slate of candidates and the 2021-2022 budget. And to end the meeting, we'll have a benediction by Rabbi Klass and Cantor Thomas.
Good evening, everyone. It is nice to be with you, particularly when the last annual meeting I was Zooming in from New Rochelle. It is nice to now be with you in Charlotte. I wanted to share with you this evening a few texts that can help us begin the work of the annual meeting of looking back and inspiring us forward. So I begin with a text that I shared at a Brotherhood event earlier this year that reminds us that this is not the first time that our community has faced such a difficulty as this past year. In the Talmud, it is told, if there is plague in the city, gather your feet. Limit the time you spend out of the house, as it is stated in the verse, and none of you shall go out of the openings of his house until the morning. And it says in another verse, come, my people, enter into your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself for a little moment until the anger has passed by. So this gets for us just a little bit of that feeling that we have had of wanting to shut our doors and hide ourselves in our chambers. But at the same time, we as a community wanted to be able to reach out to each other outside of those doors. So as a Temple Beth-El community, we shared with you through our COVID updates and communications that we were operating using two Jewish values at the forefront of our minds. The first is derived from this text of the Mishnah. Therefore, but a single person was created in the world to teach that if any man has caused a single life to perish from Israel, he is deemed by scripture as if he had caused a whole world to perish. And anyone who saves a single soul from Israel, he is deemed by scripture as if he had saved a whole world. This gets us to the idea of pikuach nefesh, of the primacy of saving a life, and that commandment to save lives really goes above and beyond all other things that we desire to do. But of course, it has to be balanced with our other desires. And we balanced that with the idea from Hillel of do not separate yourself from the community. So finding that balance between safety and community. something we've done through new ways of operating. In this moment, now that we can say that the anger that Isaiah referred to has passed by, we can draw direction from the Talmud again, from Tractate Brachot. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, one who sees his friend after 30 days have passed since last seeing him, recites, blessed, etc., who has given us life, sustained us, and brought us to this time. So that blessing is the Shechianu. And I invite you to say the Shechianu with me, thanking God for enabling us to reach this time. Because while we may have seen each other through screens and communicated with one another across screens and texts and words and emails, we are entering a new time when we will get to see each other more in person. It also reminds us to be thankful that we are here, knowing that this has been a year of loss, and there are some who have not joined us at this season, and we miss them. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'achianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. And now, looking ahead, I offer you inspiration for how we can move forward. In Pirkei Avot, it is written, make for yourself a teacher and you will acquire a friend. Each of us have had different experiences in this last year. Each one of us has different stories to share and to tell. So our challenge is to open ourselves up to hearing the stories of others and to seeing each of your fellow congregants as a teacher, to hear their truth. And in hearing their truths, we will acquire new friends and we will strengthen our community. We will also hear new things that we want to speak out about, and we want to go out into the world and make a difference around. And so I offer this second text. Rabbi Pinchas said, when a person is singing and cannot lift his voice, and another comes and sings along, another who can lift his voice, then the first will be able to lift his voice too. That is the secret of the bond between spirit and spirit. When we listen to one another, we are going to hear the songs that each one of us sings, and we can enable those songs to be heard by standing together as a Temple Bethel community. For it is told to us in Pirkei Avot, it is not our duty to finish the work, but neither are we free to desist from it. We want to move forward knowing that the work of the temple is great, and we will not finish it in this next year. It has many years and decades to go, but we can do our best and offer what each one of us uniquely has to offer to bring this community together and to strengthen it. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Nichols. We appreciate your wisdom, and we're so glad that you are a part of the Temple Bethel community. In preparation for tonight's meeting, I glanced back at my remarks from last year's annual meeting. At that time, we were about 3 months into the pandemic, and we had made the decision to close the building effective March 12, 2020. In those remarks that evening, I noted, we are planning in 2-month increments and remain flexible and prepared to pivot if necessary. Well, pivot we did. While we had hoped that conditions would allow us to reopen the building late last summer, here we are a full year removed from that meeting, and our building is now thankfully fully open. Let me be clear, there was no how-to manual or playbook for how our synagogue would navigate a worldwide pandemic. In conjunction with leadership from Shalom Park and other park partners, our clergy staff and lay leaders forged a path forward for the benefit of us all. We are indebted to the clergy and staff for making bold, forward-thinking decisions to keep our families and themselves safe, and at the same time, keeping the connections that bind us as a congregation strong and unbending. I hope you have had the opportunity to review our 2020-2021 Year in Review report, referenced in our weekly emails and posted on the annual meeting website. It details some of the ways that we have continued to live our values over the past year, with great examples of how we have prayed, learned, acted, and played together and cared for each other. Let me highlight a few items included in the report and some not included in the report that I think are telling of our success this past year. First, the Temple Bethel Gateway went live for the high holidays in 2020. We had over 3,700 unique visitors between mid-August and the end of October, and since inception have had almost 5,700 unique visitors. We are reaching way beyond our congregation in the Charlotte region. We are continuing to develop the Gateway as a tool for delivering even more content to you. Second, Temple Bethel organized and led a very informative and moving MLK Jr. Shabbat program with keynote speaker Eric Ward. Over 800 participants representing 12 Reformed congregations from across the Carolinas participated in this incredible Shabbat service. For Shavuot, we led the effort to connect with 11 communities across the East Coast with over 30 rabbis and cantors teaching and hundreds of participants. All this has driven home Temple Bethel's leadership and the strength to be found in our movement when we look beyond our traditional geographic boundaries. Next, our Tzedek Council, with Rabbi Klass's leadership, created Rodef Tzedek, Toward Justice for All, a 2026 vision for justice work at Temple Bethel. Our current listening campaign is a direct result of that vision. And we have 38 active tribes with over 340 participants led by 58 lay leaders. If you are not currently in a tribe, I highly recommend that you contact our staff to learn more. I know that my wife and I have forged deep connections with the members of our tribe. Operationally, we continue to incorporate best practices to ensure that we are running an efficient business. We have removed the silos of our past organization. Each person on staff has primary duties, but also has responsibilities to the whole. We have transitioned deserving employees to new positions of greater responsibility and empowered all of them to innovate in the name of greater service to our congregants. Again, I want to mention just a fraction of their achievements this past year. After much research and testing, our staff and lay leaders successfully implemented a new accounting software and transitioned our data from the old to the new. We optimized our pastoral database system to allow better tracking of a congregant's needs and past engagement with the clergy team. With Dan Shane's leadership, we overhauled our employee handbook and benefits, and we had the condition of our tours evaluated for the first time in 10 years, which, by the way, per the evaluation, the estimate of necessary restoration work for the tours is over $50,000. Even as I trumpet our many accomplishments over the past year, I want to acknowledge that many of our families have endured a difficult year. Simchas were altered, postponed, or even canceled. Opportunities to acknowledge the loss of loved ones were limited. The comfort and embrace so often found in Temple and with fellow congregants were missing. Many faced financial hardships through loss of employment and could not afford the necessities of everyday living. Too many, myself included, dealt with and continue to deal with the health challenges from either contracting COVID themselves or having an immediate family member with the virus. All of us have faced the challenge of missing the connection to our friends and families that we took for granted would always exist. Now we know more than ever to cherish and seek to enrich each of those connections. Please, if we can help you or someone you love, reach out to our clergy or staff for assistance. We want to help. As we move into the coming fiscal year, we will face existing and new challenges. And at the same time, there are opportunities and goals that we will embrace, just as our forefathers and mothers did in times of previous crises. Rabbi Knight will speak to our vision for strengthening our congregational bonds in his remarks following mine. He has my commitment that our lay leaders will support and actively advance a collective vision for rebuilding relationships, building a stronger, vibrant congregation, and partnering with communities near and far, in person and online. From my perspective, we have unfinished business in which we will re-engage as well as new initiatives to tackle. These include reopening the building. We will do so with prudence and common sense. We are investing in technology that will allow those who cannot or choose not to be in person to participate in our programs and services. We have begun this investment with an initial purchase and pending installation of cameras, lighting, equipment, and software for the Blumenthal Sanctuary. The investment in this technology will also require investment in training our staff and possibly adding staff with the expertise to operate and optimize the equipment and software. We are participating in a visioning process with our Shalom Park partners. The core objective of this project is to create a unified vision and set of implementable strategies to address the larger collaborative and financial challenges currently facing Shalom Park. We must continue to nurture and grow a sound financial model that is sustainable. The proposed balanced budget is based on conservative expectations from our different revenue sources. However, to provide the quantity and quality of religious services, educational programs, social justice programs, and opportunities to connect with each other, we have to grow the income from our My Temple Commitment program, our fundraising, and our endowment. Led by the expertise of our staff, we need to clearly articulate why every gift is critical to our collective well-being and make a compelling case for you to increase your commitment if you are fortunate enough to do so. And we will improve our process for acknowledging and celebrating your generosity. Lastly, you may recall prior to discussions about examining and improving our governance structure as we emerge from our fiscal difficulties in 2019-2020. Quite a bit of effort was expended on this front, and we are ready to re-engage the process that was delayed by the pandemic. We have ambitious plans to improve both the composition and operations of our governance structure. It is a large body of work that will require participation of all the board and many other congregants. A couple important subsets of that effort that I want to mention are strategic planning and staffing. Our last strategic plan was completed in 2012. We need a new plan. I propose that we do so with the assistance of a professional partner as our guide. Such a plan will necessarily involve a thorough process to allow all congregants the opportunity to provide input. The plan must be grounded in reality, visionary in its approach, and be adaptable to stay relevant. The cost of such a plan is not insignificant. If we can identify a path to fund the plan, I believe the return on investment will span many years. As I mentioned a moment ago, we are presenting a balanced budget for your review and approval. Not surprisingly, labor expenses are the largest expenditure. To state the obvious, our clergy and staff are our greatest asset. As someone who interacts with them on almost a daily basis, their level of commitment to our temple is magnificent. I am so very grateful to each of them. However, the reality is that we have reached a point where the staff as a whole cannot handle all the duties necessary to run our organization. And as most of you know, we have been operating without a full-time executive director since the fall of 2018. Rabbi Knight assumed some of the responsibilities of the ED and continues to execute those responsibilities. Even with the leadership provided by Dan Shane on a part-time basis, we recognize that this model is not in the temple's best interest. In fact, while it was necessary at the time, many of you rightly told us that we needed to find an alternate solution as soon as possible. We're going to look at alternative staffing models and recommend the one that we think give our staff the best opportunity to succeed. I think it is likely this recommendation will require additional staff. Given that we have trimmed our other expenses to be as efficient as possible, we will need additional revenue, which goes back to the point I was making earlier about growing My Temple Commitment, our endowment, and our fundraising. Regardless of the determination about staffing, I pledge that we will continue to be transparent in our actions and to make financial planning decisions based on sound, reasonable data and projections. Thank you for your continued support and the faith you have placed in the board and its officers. I look forward to seeing you at Temple Beth-El and online. Now I want to invite Rabbi Knight to share his remarks with you.
Good evening, everyone. Our tradition teaches that there is a special place in heaven for those who give tzedakah. And then there's an even higher level for those who make a shidduch, a match. And I think perhaps there should be a third, maybe even the highest level in Olam Haba, the world to come, reserved for those who come to the annual meeting. So congrats on securing your place in the world to come, and thank you so much for attending. Looking at the screen and seeing your faces and the names, and what's true is that you are a group of people that show up to make Temple what it is. And I am genuinely grateful. And on behalf of the clergy and our incredible staff team at Temple, thank you so much. One of the most important texts that we have in the Jewish canon, in the Jewish tradition, is the Talmud. And the Talmud was born out of a crisis. The sacrificial cult of biblical Judaism ended with the destruction of the Second Temple and the diaspora in 70 of the Common Era. And that was the expulsion of Jews from Israel. And the entire way that Jews practiced Judaism had been really destroyed at that time. But the rabbis, they had to rethink, they had to reform everything, they had to change everything. And the rabbis found a way to reconstruct. Yes, the destruction of the temple and the diaspora was painful and sad and disruptive. And yes, the crisis presented an important opportunity for change. And the Talmud itself became really the repository of wisdom for how the Jewish community made its way through a crisis. This last year has also included in so many different events that sort of tore at the social fabric of our society, right? We've had the pandemic, which has just been unreal. We also had some pretty significant political upheaval. We've had racism and anti-Semitism and quarantines, and the pages of the Talmud, right, they actually deal with questions that arise out of such turmoil, questions that we've been grappling with as well in this last year, about rising polarization and division in the Jewish community, and the fear of Jewish continuity and external threats of those who want to kill or rid the world of Jews, the challenge of reaching young people. All of this is continued in the Talmud. And it's set out an idea that every generation of Jews has had rupturous events. And every generation of Jews has determined to find a way to change, to reform, to evolve, and to innovate. This past year has been a challenge of a lifetime for our congregational community. And I'll admit, as your rabbi, the obstacles and the demands of dealing with the pandemic stretched us in ways that we truly never thought possible. Previously, streaming services was really a nice feature that we had. Now, the technology is really indispensable. Without these things, that we would have previously thought were indispensable, we realized how so much of what was meaningless and repetition in our community. We've come to appreciate how much we took for granted the most basic parts of congregational life. And in particular, we really recognize how important connection and human touch are. We've seen people step up and flourish in hard times. And we've seen hard times wipe out people we thought were like redwood trees standing in the forest. So what are some of the challenges that we've had that are ahead for us in our congregation and for our people, especially in the United States? Well, it used to be in America, the moral voices were religious figures, right? Religion simply doesn't play the same kind of role as it once did in society. Indeed, the fastest growing group of religious people in America today are the nones, the N-O-N-E, not affiliated with any religion. 3,500 churches in the United States close a year, and they're merging with other churches, and synagogues, especially in the Northeast, have been closing and merging as well. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what's really lost with all of this change? I sincerely believe that congregational life builds community and cohesion. And it builds community and cohesion of people with different political persuasions, people with different ideas, ways for people to come together in community. Where the public square has largely been lost, it is actually in our congregational communities where we can create bridging across lines of difference and where we can increase our sense of humanity and diversity. The pandemic also exacerbated the country's epidemic of loneliness. Over 50% of Americans feel lonely. And this has been true for many, many people in our congregation. This has been true for many people in our community, from teenagers to the elderly. And if you look inside the Jewish community, we see unique challenges too. We have a high intermarriage rate, right? And some Jews argue that intermarriage will be the end of Jewish continuity. Your clergy team at Temple Bethel adamantly disagree. And we are really proud of how we as a Jewish community choose to welcome the blessings of interfaith families. And we must continue to create a welcoming community. We have seen more hate crimes directed at Jews, more attacks. There has been a normalization of anti-Semitism inside both the far left and the far right. And there is an increasing gap between the Israeli Jewish experience and the American Jewish experience, a gap that is unfortunately becoming problematic. COVID-19 was certainly a rupture and a challenge, and it also accelerated many of the aforementioned realities and challenges. But what COVID also did is it opened the doors for risk-taking and for creativity that, should we choose to meet this moment, is a model for the risk-taking that we need right now. This is our chance to write the living Talmud of the 21st century. This is our moment to define the congregation and the Charlotte Jewish community for the next 30 to 50 years. We can approach the many unique challenges we have as a community with the creativity that we had when we faced a global pandemic. What do we have to do? Well, first, we have to identify that who we are beyond our building. Our building is an architecture of possibility, and it is beautiful. But what we've learned this last year is that the architecture of community is as important outside the building or beyond the building than the actual physical spaces in which we gather. Two is that we really need to focus on relationships. Relationships must be at the center of who we are. Our community is built one relationship at a time, creating connections between people in our community and with our clergy. No one should be able to out-community Temple Bethel. And if you want to understand why we are emphasizing tribes and different in spice and different groups and the brotherhood and the listening campaign that we're doing right now and learning opportunities, it's because this last year taught us and reminded us of the importance of strong connections and relationships of meaning and purpose. We want to focus on the shared experiences, values, hopes, and dreams of our community. We need to confront the epidemic of loneliness. We need to help one another feel supported, known, understood, and loved. Third, we must reform. We must embrace taking risks and reforming our practices in our community. Just like the era of writing the Talmud, the pandemic has launched a potentially creative disruption of the norm that we sort of desperately need if we are to enter the future with a creative and innovative mindset. The rupture of our synagogue model has opened doors for experimentation. Rather than simply revert back to operating like we were when things were sort of, quote, normal, after the restrictions are lifted, we have now an opportunity to recognize that this is our chance to confront the trends of the last 20 years. We can convert more people to Judaism, and we can bring more people into the Jewish community, and we can expand our community reach as we saw thousands of people engaging with Temple from greater geographic areas than the 21 zip codes in 3 counties in which our members live. Now is the time to think much more expansively about how technology will help us meet the Jewish needs of a broader community, and how we go beyond technology to weave the social fabric of a strong community, one person, one tribe, one group, one social circle at a time. We must be radically inclusive. Fourth, whether this is through conversion or the recognition that we have many, many Jews of color and LGBTQ plus in our community, we need to stretch the boundaries of how we think of all people in our community and their different needs. Yes, this is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's also about recognizing that our congregation is not all white Ashkenazic Jews, originally from Europe. Our congregation looks much more diverse because it is diverse, and we can be much more radically inclusive and welcoming. And finally, we need to think with a resource abundance mindset. Temple Bethel for many years fell into the trap of feeling that we are constantly in a scarcity mindset, and we have to be willing to think expansively to not limit ourselves before we've actually made a serious ask. Our partnerships on Shalom Park require us to think more expansively. The partnerships that we want to create in the region need us to think more expansively. And I'm proud of what our staff create. I'm proud that we share our best practices and learnings with the larger community and with the Reform movement. We help the larger Jewish community, and I'm proud of this perspective because we are not only creating good things at Temple Beth El, we believe that what we are creating at Temple Beth El can actually impact the Jewish world, and what we're doing is worth sharing with others. Temple Beth El, the pandemic has brought us a huge opportunity. We can acknowledge the urgency of what's facing us as a people and a religious community. We can connect with each other and build relationships of purpose and meaning as a reconnection of our priorities post-pandemic. And we can pledge to take some risks that may make us a little uncomfortable, but are needed not only to help us survive as a congregation, but to thrive as a people and a community. The rabbis of the Talmud taught us that there is no such thing as going back to the way that it was. We will create our new tomorrow and discern our way forward by both clinging to our valued principles of our tradition while reimagining and creating a more connected community. The crisis of COVID is a catalyst for the most profound meaning and purpose possible for our community. And I am so deeply appreciative that I get to work with incredible lay leaders, the most fantastic clergy team and staff team whose passion inspires me, the highest quality team that we could have. And I thank all of you for your support. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm up then. So thank you, Rabbi. And I hope you can all hear me now.
Liam, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you give us just a second? We need to switch PowerPoints. So hold on just give me just a second, and I'm going to share my screen. And let's see if we can get to you. Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to thank the rabbi. I found that guidance that he gave us really inspiring, and I certainly agree with much of what he said. I also wanted to maybe frame this conversation because what the rabbi has laid out is effectively a moral vision. And I would tell you that budgets are moral documents, that they articulate in empirical terms the temple's priorities. So tonight I want to walk you through three things. I want to walk you through where we stand in the current year budget and then the remainder of our fiscal year. I want to take you through the balance, the budget of the coming fiscal year. And then I want to talk about what we see as the risks, the opportunities, and how we manage the risks in particular. So a couple of technical notes. The first is that, again, we're on a fiscal year that runs from July to June. So that's why you see 2020 to 21 and then 21 to 22, right? And so the way we frame that is we're in the 21 fiscal year because that's when our fiscal year ends. And next year will be the 22 fiscal year. So with that, let me ask Bob to turn to the first slide, please. So this is a big picture view of our position both last year, this year, and in the coming year. And last year, what you see in the slides on the left-hand side of this page is basically the blue bars being the revenue and the pink bars being the expense. And the central takeaway that I would ask you to see here is that in 2020, fiscal 20, we had a very successful year transitioning into the My Temple Commitment revenue program. And then, of course, we had the launch of COVID. And so the combination of a very successful fundraising year and the first of the 2 PPP loans that we received generated a significant boost in revenue versus the previous year, versus expenditures that were consistent with what we've seen in 2021. So with that momentum, we went into fiscal 21, but obviously knowing full well that COVID was here. And so what we did is took a very conservative view of how that was going to play out for the community, and in particular, how that was going to show up on the revenue side of the equation. And indeed, our expectations were met. We substantially reduced our budgeted amount for My Temple Commitment down to 1.7 million. and we held expenses basically flat. This coming fiscal year, we want to work our way back. And we're going to do that largely by pursuing revenue increases in programming, in facility rentals, and in the religious school enrollment. And we'll talk about that in more detail in the next slides. But the one thing we're not doing is we're not boosting our expected amount coming out of My Temple commitment. So that is with an abundance of caution. To be clear, that does not mean that we want you to just repeat what you did this year. We would like an increase, and my colleagues, Rachel Campbell and Eden Vibhuti, will go through that in more detail in the next part of the presentation. But I really want to emphasize the degree to which we are being conservative in our budgeting, but we will be aggressive in our ask. So let us turn next to the next slide, if we can, Bob. So this is very quickly where we ended up at the end of this fiscal year, which we have a couple more weeks to go. Couple key things to take away. On the left-hand side, single most important revenue item for us, My Temple commitment at 72% of our budget. Single most important expense item on the right-hand side, people. And the payroll number in blue represents all of the staff and the clergy focused on everything but education. And then embedded in the orange slice on the right is the staff associated with education. So again, people, our most important asset and our most significant expense. Item 2, on the left-hand side, PPP. That's the second of the 2 PPP loans that we have received and we expect will be turned into a grant, which will allow us to avoid using income from the endowment. That's the main takeaway, both from fiscal 20 and fiscal 21. We had 2 years of about $550,000 of PPP grants that allowed us to avoid using earnings on the endowment. And I'll speak to the endowment in more detail on a slide or two from here. So now let's turn to the coming budget year. Bob, if you wouldn't mind. So again, similar colors, but really what I would like to highlight here is on My Temple commitment, the number is basically the same. And the percentage is smaller because we think we're going to be generating more revenue. Now, how we're generating our revenue is important. One, we expect to see revenue from the school go up because enrollment is going to go up. As you can see on the right-hand side, we continue to spend significantly more on the school than we raise in revenue. And again, as I said earlier, a budget is a moral document. And one of the central tenets of our morality as a temple is to educate. And for that reason, we're not looking at this at the school programs and saying, you know, you survive on what you raise. That's not the way we have chosen to allocate our resources. Item 2, on the left-hand side again, is that for the first time, we're going to be drawing on the endowment earnings that were permitted to do so. And we'll go into that in more detail. But that effectively means that we don't have the PPP loan coming in this coming year. And so we've been the thing we've been able to avoid doing in the last 2 years, we're going to do this year from a financial standpoint. So again, I would emphasize to you that the My Temple commitment number that we're planning on is conservatively being held flat, but we are asking for more. So that's the proposed budget. And again, as Ben says, this is a balanced budget and we have every reason to believe that we can deliver on that. Bob, could you turn to the next page, please? Now, I've mentioned the endowment several times. What I wanted to do on this page is shed a little light on how the endowment is organized. On the left-hand side in the top left, we've shown you 2 things, right? We've shown you the endowment assets, and then we've shown you the available amount of dollars that could be spent. So the endowment assets have been growing. And in particular, what you can see from the end of fiscal 2019 to the projected to March of this year, that we've seen a growth of over $2.5 million in the principal amount. Now, some of that is attributable to growth in the portfolio. Stock market's been up and we've taken advantage of that. But importantly, a decent chunk of that has been through significant gifts, including one gift for over $1 million. What does that do to our spendable? Well, as you can see, the spendable is also going up. So there are three kinds of spendable for us. There's the blue bar, which represents monies that we can dedicate towards any operating expense. The orange slice of these bars, which represents funds that can be designated for a specific purpose, like the building fund. And then lastly, the item that has been growing most significantly is funds that we've received for a special purpose. So for example, we've received a significant grant for social justice, and that is immediately available to us. But again, it's designated as an endowment fund, albeit one that we can spend quickly. So what does this mean? So this means that we have over $1 million projected by the end of our fiscal year in this coming year. Now, of that million, we're expecting to spend approximately $268,000. Additionally, we've also been committed as a board to spending approximately $125,000 this year, attributable to technology expenditures. So these investments that we are making are supported by a robust pool of funds that have been made available through the generosity of generations of Charlotteans. Okay, moving on to the next page then. What I wanted to flag for you is the things that we think about as your board, and in particular we think about because we are fiduciaries. The first thing we spend time considering is how are we doing on my temple commitment? And again, we'll go into more detail on that when Rachel and Eden speak about this. But there's always the possibility that we fall short of the forecast. Right now, we're confident that for this fiscal year, we should be able to hit our target. To be clear, we generally assume that some portion of the pledges that we receive will not be paid in this fiscal year. And that's been consistently observed over the past. In terms of the coming fiscal year, the main risk we see on the revenue side is really around school attendance. And while we all certainly hope to see and are planning on seeing more kids in our community coming into class, there is always the possibility that that could fall short. We have room to maneuver. If that's the case, we can bring our expenditures down in correspondence with revenues. But that won't be a one-for-one relationship. Something that's out there, that's always out there with an older building, is some unplanned repair that we didn't necessarily expect, if a tree hits the building, for example. So that's just something we have to keep an eye on. We do have reserves for that sort of thing, but if there's something significant, that would be an outlier for us from a budgetary standpoint. We also know that the relationship with Shalom Park, as Rabbi mentioned, is a significant one to us. And changes to that operating model or cost structure can have an impact on our budget as well. Staffing, obviously Ben mentioned at the start of this conversation that staffing is a really critical question for us right now. So what I'm hoping to sort of convey to you is the focus that we have on risk management. And with that, I would also flag the very low probability but significant consequence that might come if the PPP loan that we plan on recognizing this year isn't granted to us. Again, low probability, I don't expect that to happen, but it would be a big number. And so I feel like we need to be transparent with you, our congregation, about what the risks are. So enough about risks, let's talk about opportunities. The opportunity that we have is to get back to 2019, 2020 levels of my temple commitment and school revenues. And that is what we're really hoping for, and that is what we will be speaking to you about in a moment. Facility rentals may also come in higher as we go back to the temple, and we've already seen significant contracts signed that might support an increase in that budget. So we will keep a close eye on that, and we hope to report back positively in the coming months. So these are our risks, these are our opportunities. Let me turn now to the page that speaks to how we manage the risk. Cash is king for our temple. And one of the main ways which we know that we have enough cash is by the growing size of the spendable in our endowment. So that is really critical as a safety net for us. We also have restricted funds on our balance sheet. So these are not endowed funds, but these are grants that somebody has assigned to us for a specific purpose. And then in the coming year budget, we have 100,000 of expenditures that has already effectively been paid for through these restricted funds. The line of credit is our last line of defense, and it's over $400,000 with South State Bank. To be clear, we have never used the line of credit in my tenure on the board. We don't particularly want to use the line of credit because ideally we can manage our operations with our operating dollars, but still it's there in case we need it. It represents 2 months of operating expense. And before we would hit it, we have a number of reporting routines that would monitor our cash flow and would alert us to the possibility of having to draw on that line. Other management routines we have is really around expense control, which has been a key focus of Dan Shane and Mark Risco, as well as the rest of the leadership team, and the board as well. And then lastly, we're going to be laser focused in the coming months on how we're doing on My Temple commitment pledges. Last year, we established warning triggers to determine whether or not there were risks to our budget. And basically by August, we expect to see pledges equal to our budgeted number, if not in excess of that. To the extent that we fall short in August, there are a number of escalation processes with the board that we're going to undertake, and we will take action should that happen. But again, my sincere hope is that we do not need to worry about that. With that, I would like to thank you for listening and also turn it over to Eden and Rachel to speak about My Temple commitment and development.
Hello. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Eden GoBuddy, and I am Temple Bethel's Director of Development and Member Services. And I started in this role in August. And unfortunately, it's hard to meet people during the pandemic. And I also wanted to let you know that we have a new congregant support administrative assistant whose name is Madeline White, who's on the call but off screen right now, who started in January. So we are essentially your development and membership team. I wanted to start by thanking all of the congregation for stepping up. In this first chart that I have here, I wanted to show you that there has been a significant shift in our membership's contributions towards My Temple commitment since its inception 2 years ago. So if you take a look, especially at this second cluster of levels of giving that shows from 2,000 essentially to 3,000, the number of members that are giving within that category, which includes that 2,200 base My Temple commitment, has increased substantially. The first bar shows 2018, 2019, and you can see in the last 2 years, it's gone up substantially. While the number of members paying $1,000 or less has gone down significantly. Many of the people who are paying quite a low amount for sacred gifts chose not to continue with the My Temple commitment structure, and others significantly increased their gift when they were presented with My Temple commitment. We thank those of you so much who have stepped up, as well as those of you who have remained or become sustainers. And our number of sustainers, as you can see, has remained relatively flat. That's the bars on the far left, with a little bit of a drop off just due to COVID over the last year. On the next slide, we have, a complementary chart that shows that the amount of revenue that we receive from those giving our base commitment of $2,200 per family has significantly increased since the beginning of My Temple commitment. So again, that's the second cluster of bars. So overall, what we're seeing is that the proportion of our membership that is giving at higher levels has increased, and the amount of our revenue that is coming from these higher levels has also increased. So thank you so much for heeding our call and for helping to position Temple Bethel in a stronger financial position through your generous support. Speaking of generous support, I also wanted to share information about two major gifts that have been finalized over the past few months. The first one is called the Gesher Good Works Fund, a new fund that is adjacent to the Clergy Good Works Fund and gives our clergy the means to distribute grants to congregants and community members who have a financial need that can be remedied through a one-time gift. Help with rent before unemployment kicks in, help with car repairs that are necessary for getting to work, things like that. Recipients will be encouraged to pay it forward and make a gift back to this fund when they are able. This fund, which was created by a generous, anonymous Temple Beth-El member, is not endowed, meaning that the full amount is available to be distributed as needed, although the funds are being housed at the Foundation for the Charlotte Jewish Community, and we so appreciate their partnership led by Phil Warshauer. If you are so inclined, additional donations to this fund are welcome and appreciated so that we can help even more people through these funds. The second major gift that we've had recently is a passion project by an incredibly generous family seeking to make an impact at Temple Beth-El for generations to come. Sam and Emily Zimmern have established the Ahavat Medinat Yisrael Endowment, also known as the Love of the State of Israel Endowment, to provide support for programming that brings Temple Beth-El's membership into greater conversation and relationship with the State of Israel. Beginning with the coming fiscal year, Temple Beth-El will host an Israel-related scholar in residence, an Elements of Judaism course. Israel will be woven more deeply into the fabric of our religious school curriculum, and more. With this endowed gift, the Zimmerns have demonstrated the power of building a legacy at Temple Beth-El, and we encourage others who are passionate about Israel programming to contribute to this endowment or to engage us in conversation about the pieces of our congregation that you are most passionate about. Thank you again to our anonymous Gesher Fund donor and to the Zimmerns for choosing to create these legacies within Temple Beth-El. And finally, I wanted to make sure you are saving the date for our big congregation-wide fundraiser, the sequel to 2019's High on Laughter, which will be held on Saturday, November 6th. More details are coming soon. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Campbell, and it is my pleasure to share with you all tonight what our membership levels will look like for the upcoming year. The board has approved a 3.5% increase for all membership levels in order to, as Liam said, demonstrate fiscal responsibility and to accommodate the costs of maintaining our active Temple Beth-El community and our facilities. While this increase should only impact your budgets modestly, because as you can see, the maximum increase is $72, the collective increases will have a significant impact on our revenue. This is the first time we've instituted an increase since adapting the My Temple commitment model 3 years ago, and we're grateful in advance for you rising to the occasion once again. While we are not changing our sustainer levels at this time, we do ask sustainers that you please consider increasing your My Temple commitment by 3.5% as well. We, of course, recognize that not everyone has the ability to meet the base level commitment that's been requested of your family. This will be our third year of executing our commitment review process. This process is completely confidential and it's comprehensive. It's a way to ask for assistance paying your base level commitment, as well as religious school, Hebrew High, and B'nai Mitzvah fees if those are applicable to your family at this time. Now, if you have completed a commitment review in the past, we are asking that you please reapply for this upcoming year. Your previous commitment review level will not be carrying forward. So we'd like everyone to reapply. Now, finally, the third big My Temple commitment update. In order to simplify things moving forward and to take away some of those barriers regarding renewing membership, we are implementing a continual giving model for those of you who pay by credit card or by bank transfer beginning in the 2022-2023 fiscal year, meaning we need your permission to do so in this fiscal year. It had always been the intent for continual giving to be woven into the My Temple commitment model, and now we've got some barriers out of the way, and it's going to enable us to do this. All of this information and more was included in an email that you should have received earlier today and will be included in a letter that will be arriving in your physical mailbox in the next week or so. I'm going to head it back over to Eden, who's going to talk about the timeline for some of these things. Thank you all again so much, and looking forward to taking any questions you might have once we get to the end here.
So you all should have received an email. We sent it about an hour before the meeting so that it would be right at the top of your inbox, hopefully, as we headed into this conversation. And I've seen actually a bunch of them. My inbox is starting to be filled up with my temple commitment, which is really amazing. And so that email has links to confirm your commitment or to fill out a commitment review form. A letter is also on its way to your home with a little bit more personalized information. And so if you are ready to make your commitment, please go ahead and do so using the links that were in the email, and I saw Andy just posted in the chat as well. With the High Holy Days on the earlier end this year, we're asking for all commitment review forms to be filled out by June 30th and all My Temple commitment confirmations to be filled out by July 15th. Thank you in advance for making your generous commitment early so that we can plan accordingly for the coming year and make High Holy Day planning easier for all of us. So as we close out our portion, I just wanted to share a personal update as we launch My Temple commitment. For those of you who don't know, membership is a major part of my role that I take very seriously, both engaging our existing membership and helping Temple Bethel to continue to grow. And so I am doing my part with that by bringing 2 new members into Temple Bethel in the next few weeks. I will be heading out on maternity leave as my husband, Kevin, and I welcome our twins. And I wanted to let you know that Madeline White, who I mentioned earlier, and Mark Risco will be your primary contacts for My Temple commitment, who will be able to answer all of your questions about commitment review, My Temple commitment, and more. So if you have questions, I'm around for a few more weeks, and then please don't hesitate to reach out to our office if you have questions. Thank you again so much. I'm going to now pass it back over to Ben.
Thank you, Eden, and congratulations. As the father of twins, you have a lot of fun in front of you. Also, thank you to Liam and Rachel for their remarks about our budget and My Temple commitment. Per Article 10 of our bylaws, we formed a committee to nominate congregants for the board of directors and officer positions. I want to thank the members of the committee whose names are shown on this slide. Special thanks to Alan and Jason for their leadership and contribution to the process. I also want to mention that in February of this year, we asked members who were interested in serving on the board to submit a self-nomination application. And I want to thank those congregants who chose to do so. We're very, very grateful for your interest in serving on the board. We know that each of you strongly believe in the mission of the temple. And we know each of you will contribute to our success, be it on the board or in other capacities. So next slide will show you our current board members who are serving remaining years on their term. The 1-year term, Jason Schechter, John Small, Renee Sutker, and the 2-year term, Mark Cohen and Lisa Spritz. No action is required for these board members. As well, no action is required for board members who are designated from the bylaws. For instance, our SPICE representative, Bob Wolf, our upcoming Brotherhood representative, Howard Glazer, Julie Dermack for Sisterhood, presidential appointee, Cindy Patterson, our honorary life presidents, Norm Levine and Jonathan Howard. All our clergy are ex officio members, and thanks to our legal counsel, our volunteer legal counsel, Eric Frick. So no action required for those. For the proposed directors who a vote is required for, 1-year term is Andy Siegel, 2-year term, Nancy Adamo and Tracy Adams, 3-year term, Melanie Barron, Doug Benson, Eliza Carney, and David Crane. And then lastly, we do vote on a 1-year term for our proposed slate of officers. Myself for president, Alan Kronovit for first vice president, Alan Sherman, vice president of education, Jill Blumenthal, vice president of planning, Liam Stokes for treasurer, and Jamie Bryan for secretary. So as we prepare, I want to also acknowledge our current board members rolling off the board. They include Emily Adamo, Robin Buckler, Brian Emery, Ken Katz, Jeremy Naiman, Stephen Phillipson, and AJ Sechrist. Thank you all so much for your service to the board. We very much appreciate it. With that, we're gonna go to questions and answers, which Dan Shane has been hopefully collating and is going to read to us. No questions? Wow, that's amazing. Okay, did not expect that. I guess Liam and Eden and Rachel did a great job. So seeing that there are no questions, we will move to our voting, and throw it back to Ken.
Thanks, Ben. And yes, no questions. Wow, it'll be interesting to see if that influences the voting here. Before we vote, though, first, just some ground rules. There is one vote per household. That's not per person. So please adhere to that. We certainly will have the results, but I did want to make sure that for those that have multiple individuals, it is one vote per household. There are two questions on the ballot. Vote for or against the entire slate of directors and officers, and vote for or against the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. We'll have a aspirational goal here of about 1 minute or so allotted for voting. Certainly at discretion, there's more time if needed. And with that, Natalie, can you pull up the ballot?
Unfortunately, I cannot at the moment. Rabbi Knight, can you please look and see if you have access to the poll? Or Rabbi Nichols? Please.
It's up.
It's up.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Whoops.
All right, this is the only time you can vote twice. So if you're locked out while we saw the results, feel free to live large.
For some reason it says that we're gonna need people to re-vote. I'm sorry to do that, but the poll somehow closed, and I don't know why.
Yep, it's back up, Rabbi Knight.
Okay.
So even if you're not in Chicago, you can vote twice tonight.
Just when we're getting good at this Zoom thing, we reopen our building, huh?
Right. Well, right now we have 85 out of 104 that have voted. That may be some adhering to the one vote per household, and thank you. We'll leave the poll up just for a few more seconds.
And somebody voted in the chat box as well.
Okay, duly noted. And if anybody else is having trouble at this point, please feel free to use the chat box.
And would you like me to end the polling now?
Yep, I was just about to say that. I think it's safe to end the polling. Thank you, Natalie. And both ballots have passed and have been approved nearly unanimously with one no vote for the 2020-2021 budget as approved and recommended by the Board of Directors. So with that, let me be the first to congratulate and welcome our new board members.
Thanks, Ken. I want to echo that, congratulate the new board members, and once again, thank those members who were rolling off. As we come to the conclusion of our meeting, before I turn over to Rabbi Klass and Cantor Thomas for our benediction, I want to thank a few people who were instrumental in planning tonight's meeting. From the board, for the second year in a row, Bob Wolf was our project manager extraordinaire. His contributions to this meeting, as well as his contributions on the board, have been a great gift to us all. From the Temple, Tracy Lederer, Natalie Friedlander, and Andy Harkavy were pivotal in making the meeting happen. For the past 15 months, they have been an important part of the glue that has held this congregation together. Please thank them and all of our great staff at every opportunity. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rabbi Klass and Cantor Thomas.
A blessing to close out our time together. God of all that is constant and all that changes constantly, thank you for this incredible, consistent, and consistently changing community. We are who we are as a temple because of what we each bring. We have accomplished what we have accomplished because of you. And we will become what we become because of you, because of the time, talent, dedication, and investment of each and every one of you.
As we meet this new year with curiosity and courage, may we each have the strength to continue to bring the best of who we are to our temple family. May we bring our minds to learn, our hearts to care, and our hands to build what we know this synagogue can be. As we continue to create new ways to gather, in person, online, and in ways we have not yet even imagined, may we feel joy in one another's company, understanding in one another's eyes, and a sense of God's presence surrounding us in moments big and small.
And so tonight we offer the words of Birkat Kohanim, a blessing to acknowledge this moment in all its simultaneous practicality and holiness.
Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May God bless you and keep you.
Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka.
May God shine upon you and may you feel God's radiance.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
May God be with each of you and all of us. And may we all feel the greatest of God's gifts, the blessing of shalom, of peace. We say, Ken Yehirat Son, may this be God's will, and amen.
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 Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Klass and Cantor Thomas. And with the benediction ending, I would like to thank everyone for calling in on the Zoom meeting tonight. We appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, for all of the efforts putting together our annual meeting. And we so appreciate the collaboration and support of all of our temple members. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.